He was always my really young cousin. So I'd like to begin by reading a passage from the introduction of King Antonius Mathematical Field of Thesis. How joyous I am to Toko Shinran, disciple of Shakyamuni. Rare is it to come upon the sacred scriptures from the westward land of India and the commentaries of the masters of 10 and 15. Now I have been able to encounter them. Rare is it to hear them, but already I have been able to. Reverently entrusting myself to teaching, practice, and realization that are the true essence of pure language, and especially aware of the profound truth of the positive language. Here I rejoice in what I have heard, and extol what I have seen. No one knows. So how I interpret what Shinran is saying is that for us to encounter the Buddha's teaching is really a rare opportunity. But the Buddha didn't inject the doctrine. Maybe this might address some of the publishers want to. But the Buddha didn't invent a doctrine. He wasn't a savior. He wasn't one that went out and saved the world. But what the Buddha saw was what was already there. So he discovered the truth of our existence, the truth of reality. So Buddhism really is a religion of discovery. It has always been there for us. It's just open our eyes to see. So the Dharma School story, I think, is really a wonderful portrayal of the legend. So I've said this before, but I've always viewed the Twin Cities Summit as a big tent. It's supported by the central pole that's the Dharma, that unifies us. And the tank is the embrace of Amida Buddha, the embodiment of infinite wisdom and compassion. He really never abandons any of us to allow us to be our true authentic selves. Now, this tent that I refer to welcomes people of any background to foster compassion and equality. It allows people of various interests to gather. And this is all due to the targeted benevolence that I spoke about in the opening classes. We all attend services for different reasons. Some come to maybe try to be a better person, and to understand the difficult questions in their lives. Others may come to see their friends. I think we all come to see Lillian, of course. But I have to admit, I come to eat Stacy Moore's chicken. So I was really happy to see that you're here today. And then I said, first thing I said was not hi Stacy, but did you bring chicken? And she said yes. So these are important, really all important reasons to attend service. And practice in the Chin tradition is found in living our lives and learning from our life experiences really with each other. And as the Bodhisattva vows state, the Dharma gates are countless. And Dharma gates are really entry points to the Dharma. So with the Dharma at its core, we can go beyond any differences and treat everyone as spiritual family. So today, today's Hanumatsu, which means flower festival, and it's the birthday celebration of Siddhartha Gautama, who becomes Shakyamuni Buddha, the historical Buddha. And this happened over 2,600 years ago. We used to always say 2,500 years ago, but I think we can now up it to 2,600 years. And with this celebration, we welcome him into our own lives. Now, our previous overseeing minister, Reverend Ron, who really served our community for 50 years, he would often repeat the same Hanumatsu story when he gave a Dharma talk to us for this holiday. And so, but each time he would say, each time you hear the story, it's different for you, as you are a different person. But he's also a different person as he tells the story. So the circumstances are always different. So we're all different from moment to moment. And that's the Buddhist meaning of impermanence. But that didn't stop me, of course, from giving a hard time. Every time you tell the story, I heard the same story for 50 years. So. Well, this isn't being recorded. You edit that part out. So I want to share a writing attributed to Renyo Shonin. So Renyo is the 8th spiritual leader and direct descendant of Shinran. So he was alive in the 1400s and is credited with significant growth of Jodo Shinshu. So he spoke about hearing one teaching repeatedly. This is what he said. He said, after you have gained Shinjin, even when you hear the same teaching again, you should feel as if it was for the first time. People only wish to hear something new. However many times you may hear the same teaching, you ought to think that this is the rare, marvelous teaching you have never heard before. So I think what Renyo is reminding us is that the opportunity to hear the Dharma is really a rare and wonderful opportunity. And Connie was referencing this in her opening meditation of the meaning of Ichigo Ichie, treasuring the unrepeatable nature of a moment. So, we all think of our time in this world as finite, but really, our life is the age of the universe. You think about it. The flow of life from the past, too numerous to really understand, has resulted in each of our existence. So when you understand this, our time in our human form in this world is really minuscule, just a blip in time. So that very short moment is where we have a chance to hear this teaching, which is why we can understand the rarity of this encounter for us together today. So it's amazing to think that after 2,600 years since the Buddha's birth, several continents of migration, and the trauma that our ancestors endured, we can be together at Persian Park. Each of the names that we heard read, that people read at the beginning, that we're honoring today, really they've all laid the foundation for us to be here today. Whether they were members or not, it doesn't matter. They led us all to this particular point. So when we celebrate the birth of the Buddha, or the birth of the Buddha, on Hanamatsuri, it's expressing our gratitude for what the Buddha brought to the world and for the rare opportunity for us to encounter the teachings. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the symbolism that you see today, since the altar arrangement is very different from what we're used to. So many of the rituals we observe during Hanamatsuri really are based on the legends that we're told that happened at the time of Prince Siddhartha's birth. So as was common back in the day, Queen Maya was returning to her family home to give birth to her baby. So on their way, the queen wanted to rest, so they came upon Lumbini's garden, and that's where Siddhartha was born. So the story goes, she stood upright, held on to the branch of a tree, or maybe plucked a leaf. Apparently this is like the posture adopted by mothers who gave birth to Buddhas. And the child was born from under her right arm. Obviously a story told by some male. So the Hanamido, or the altar of bright flowers that you all assembled, that Ewan actually did a lot of the flower arrangement, is a setting for the beautiful Lumbini garden, and that's where he was born. It's said that with his birth, the flowers bloomed, and all the celestial birds and heavenly beings sang in celebration of his birth. And so that's represented by all of us singing and chanting. So it's said that the heavens were so moved that it rained a sweet rain perfumed by flower petals, bathing the Buddha. So we pour sweet tea over the statue of the Buddha, and that's just called Kambutsu. So I think it's a very important point that you understand this, so listen very carefully. Especially this is for Abby, by the way. The sweet tea that's poured over the statue of the Buddha in the Hanamido is called amacha. So it's a tea made by soaking the leaves of a certain variety of hydrangea. So it's so sweet that it's many times the sweetness of sugar. So it's thought to have medicinal properties, including the treatment of periodontal disease. It all comes back to dentistry, right, Charlie? So it said that all of nature was announcing and celebrating the birth of the Buddha. So when I hear that all of nature celebrated, I'm sure they also meant cats. That cats showed up to celebrate the Buddha's birth. This gives me an excuse to talk about our cats. So we have two cats, Mochi and Bodhi. And many of you have cats. I know Paul, we often sing stories about our cats. So, they moved from Minneapolis now to Chicago, so they've adapted well. But Mochi in particular, just to let you know, he's a Buddhist cat, and I know that. Now, how do I know? Because he has a name, so I have to show you a picture. And he's in Gasho, right? But he also says Namo Amida Butsu all the time. So to you it might sound like meowing, but to me he's saying Namo Amida Butsu. You know when he says Namo Amida Butsu spontaneously all the time. So he's saying it out of gratitude that Amida is thinking of him too. And being a rescue cat, he's grateful for Connie and I, and for the food we give him, for the interdependence of life, and all the things that sustain him. So he's very smart. We're working on trying to get him to see Dr. Moss before you, so he won't. I think it's too many syllables or something. But I think if Mochi and Bodhi understand the importance of the Buddha's birth, they're probably cats probably there 2600 years ago too. So I can't, for fair equal time, that's Mochi and hold the picture. Yeah? So I think one of the best parts of the story of his birth is that the newborn baby immediately got up and walked 7 steps. He raised one hand pointing to the sky and one hand pointing to the ground, and he said, "In the heavens above and on earth below, I alone will become the honored one." Now, you've probably heard this before, but I recently learned there was a second part, which I didn't know. He also said, "This world is filled with suffering, and I will bring true comfort to people." So obviously a very articulate newborn. So when he walked the 7 steps, it really symbolized going beyond or transcending the 6 realms of samsara, or human life into awakening. Now his declaration at first might sound pretty conceited, but one way to think about it is how we think about our own births, or the births of our children. Now when we're born, we all make our own personal statements by crying out as loudly as we can, and it's our way of saying here. Now, as we celebrate the birth of the Buddha on Hanamasi, instead of being caught up in whether the story is historically true, we should try to understand what the stories mean. They have spiritual significance for us. So for all of you parents, when your child was born, I'm sure you would describe it as a feeling of indescribable joy. When your child was born, you knew their birth changed the entire world, like the Buddhists. Now, this fact is especially known by Amida Buddha, and is why the Buddha has vowed to ensure that all of us can and will be born in the Pure Land as a Buddha. When Kyle was born, I realized more clearly that the joy of birth is without bounds. And it's timeless and filled with life. Like Siddhartha's parents, I appreciated it as the rare event that it was. Like the 3 treasures say, how rare and wondrous it is to be born into human life. So when we hear the Dharma, we will unfailingly become a world honored one like the Buddha. So we just celebrated Women's History Month, and I think it's important to recognize the Buddha's mother, Queen Maya. And I can understand the heartbreak and suffering she must have gone through with her difficulties of becoming pregnant for 20 years. Yet she is the one who gave the Buddha life through her body, realizing that motherhood demands breaking through limitations. And I think that may be why they named him Siddhartha, and every wish fulfilled. Now, sadly, she died shortly after childbirth, and with the ultimate sacrifice of her life, the Buddha was able to be born. So Hanamatsu, I think, is really the celebration of every birth and the value of all life. Now, in the largest sutra, one of the 3 Pure Land sutras that Shinran points to for our tradition, it explains the reason for the Buddha's appearance in the world was to reveal Amida Buddha's great wisdom and compassion through the sutra. So Shinran quotes from the larger sutra in the Hymns of the Pure Land, and it goes like this: "The fundamental intent for which the Buddha appeared in the world is to reveal the truth and reality of the primal vow. He taught that to encounter or behold a Buddha is as rare as the blossoming of the Udambara." What's the Udambara? So Udambara apparently is a flower that only blossoms every 3,000 years. It's very, very thing. So now, without the birth of Shakyamuni Buddha, we would not be able to encounter the primal vow. Now, through the primal vow, we are assured of our liberation, which gives us comfort, allowing us to focus on what is important, our life here and now. But because of the way we see things through our own ego lens of understanding, it's difficult to see the great compassion in our life. So by this statement, by recognizing and appreciating the rarity of birth, he's reminding us to see the Buddha nature in all beings. We each have the profound potential to become a Buddha, and we usually think dualistically, like good and bad, self and other. And Shinran says Buddha nature is called the state of regarding each being as one's only child. So by doing so, we understand it is the mind of equality concerning all sentient beings. So you may not know this, but the Buddha was a revolutionary at his time. He spoke out against the caste system, which was prevalent in India at that time. And I think you can probably argue that's still present today. in many forms in our modern society. Now, the caste system meant that into what family you were born was your predetermined future. If you were noble by birth, you were noble, and if you were considered an undesirable person, that would continue on. So the Buddha is quoted as saying, "You are not noble because of the family to which you were born. Rather, we become noble as a result of our actions." So that is regarding each being as one's only child, the mind of equality. Now, this was revolutionary thinking at the time, and in our current political climate, you could argue it's still revolutionary thinking today. So can we see the value of each birth, the Buddha nature in others, and extend compassion like the Buddha? Important thing for us to think about. Now, Shakyamuni Buddha is telling us how rare it is to be born in the world, how rare it is to encounter that voiceless voice coming from true and real life that comes into ourselves, transforming and redirecting our life. He's telling us our time in this world is limited, and thus we should more deeply appreciate this life. It's about the urgency of time. You know, since Kyle is allowing us to his presence today, he recently visited us in Chicago. He took us to a Bulls game, which is against the Timberwolves, Minnesota Timberwolves. And the Timberwolves had a 23-point lead at half, only to eventually lose the game. So being a foolish being, you know, I wasn't a calm Buddhist during that game. And as also as a Minnesota sports fan, my blind passion surfaced, and I was prepared to be disappointed, like our karmic past has always been, it seems like, as a Minnesota sports fan. So when I watched the game, I was reminded how important time is. Time was of the essence no matter which team you were cheering for. And I watched an analysis after the game with the critiques of both teams, how they played, the coaching decisions made, in time management. And so this kind of analysis doesn't happen in our lives. Can you imagine if the Buddha gave a post-game analysis of our life like this? You know, I think hearing the Buddha's wisdom like that, like a sports commentator, you know, could be helpful, but it's probably also very painful for each of us to hear the truth. But maybe that's why we come to services, to see Buddha's wisdom, and to better understand ourselves and see the urgency in our life. You know, we often procrastinate thinking we have time, but Renyo reminds us, listen to the Buddha's teaching, even if you must take the time from your daily business. To believe that you will listen when you have spare time is shallow thinking. There is no tomorrow in listening to the teaching. Very profound. So we're all being asked by the world of truth to wake up. And that is a call from a leader when we say Namo Amidavasi. You know, this shouldn't just be a Sunday thing for each of us. It's common to compartmentalize our religious life from our daily life. Think only about the Buddha Dharma when we're at service like this. But the light of Amida shines without obstruction all the time. We're just not aware of its presence. And the Dharma is everywhere. You know, I used to think of my daily difficulties and troubles as problems, but through the light of Amida expanding my view, I now try to see troubles as opportunities to grow. And to be honest, I'm not very successful at that. But it's what you learn from life, and we can learn from every experience, both good and difficult. You know, if we don't learn anything from our experiences, then you might think maybe we're wasting our lives. But this is Jodo Shinshu practice, which is often described as deep hearing. This is not listening from your heart or from your ears, but listening with our hearts. So with the Dharma as a center pole of support, our ancestors made sure this big tent was available for all of us. You know, we're all assured of space beneath and protected by the tent due to them. And by the embrace of the dynamic wisdom and boundless compassion embodied by Amida Buddha, we can be our true selves. Each of us should cherish this rare opportunity to deeply hear the Buddha Dharma. So in closing, please join me in Gasho as I reread the passage from the introduction of the Jodo Shinshu. How joyous I am, the Tokuchinran, disciple of Shakyamuni. Rare is it to come upon the sacred scriptures from the westward land of India and the commentaries of the masters of China and Japan. But now I have been able to encounter them. Rare is it to hear them, but already I have been able to hear. Reverently entrusting myself to the teaching, practice, and realization that are the true essence of the Pure Land Way, and especially aware of the profundity of the Tathagata's benevolence. Here I rejoice in what I have heard. and extol what I have attained. Namo Amida Butsu.
Namo
Namo
Amida
Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.
Butsu.
Thank you all for coming today. I appreciate seeing all of you, and makes me homesick for sure. So thank you.
Thank you, Rev Todd.
Did everybody get the